2014 meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Our meeting tonight is jam-packed with gifts, and so I'm going to ask for an approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
I second.
All those in favor signify by the appropriate sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Appropriate sign.
Yes. I'm going to move on to item 3, which is the consent agenda. Could I have a similar motion relative to the acceptance of that agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries as well. Mr. Schwant, are there any customers to be heard or recognitions?
No.
Is there any old business?
No.
Are there any reports from the members of the City Council? Heidi, I understand you might have a report for us.
Well, I don't think I have anything to say that isn't already known. Council approved the streetlight service agreement as well as the transfer agreement at our last meeting. So that would be my report.
Okay, that's it?
I think so.
No embellishments at all.
No embellishments?
Embellishments? No.
Okay,
Should there be?
I don't know. For those of you in the public who are watching our meeting tonight, the actions taken by the City Council from the perspective of the Moorhead Public Service Commission are somewhat historic in that we have negotiated at long last an agreement relative to the biggest item that we deal with, and that's our city transfer, or the money that we transfer to the City of Moorhead. Personally, I want to thank Heidi Duran. I want to thank Chuck. I want to thank anybody who sat on that particular committee, including the mayor and Mike Hewlett, for the time they spent working with both Dave and with Ralph from our organization to put together what is a very well constructed agreement that hopefully will give us the kind of reliability in terms of knowing our numbers off into the future. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am personally that that has taken place. It is truly something that had to be done, and it took us a long time to do it. And I thank you for your persistence and the hard work, all of you. I really do. Okay, moving on to the next item. That would be members of the Public Service Commission. Do you have something to report? Les?
I do have something to report. Last week, someone stopped me wherever I was. Sure, it was not a bar, but it was someplace.
I was just going to ask you about that.
In Moorhead, and he said, you know, some of the people we can hear on TV and some we don't hear very well. So I'd just like to remind all of the folks up here that a little set of instructions about how near and how far from the microphones we should be, and to speak clearly so our people out there can hear.
You know,
He did say that guy in the middle we always hear what he has.
You know, and it's interesting you should say that, because I would assume that there are some that would just as soon hear less from the guy in the middle.
He didn't insinuate
Okay,
that, but
okay.
maybe.
I will accept
So,
it if he did.
I'm just suggesting that
Everybody
we make
speaks
sure
up.
where the mic is and speak clearly and loudly.
Thank you, Les. Duly noted. And I would tell Casey to put it in the minutes, but obviously we don't have Casey tonight. We'll see how good this stand-in is for her. Okay, pardon?
One item.
Would you like to speak to
Yeah,
it?
I have one item from my end. I'm going to talk about a meeting that I wasn't at, so that's going to be fun. I was supposed to be at the Lake Agassiz Water Association meeting last week, and I couldn't make that meeting. However, there was a follow-up article in the forum about the water pipe coming from the Missouri into town. And I don't think any action has been taken, but based on that article, it looks like there's going to be a push on the North Dakota side, on the government side, to actually fund it. And that thing, as we have said before, may be moving faster than we thought it was going to move. If that is the case, then we really have to start thinking about what we're going to do if we come to a point where we have to make a decision whether or not to participate. I just want to bring this up to this association, to this organization, to have us start thinking about it. And I also think that maybe we should start talking to the city about this as well, because this is going to be a big project for all of us, and I don't know whether we even on our own could handle it from a financial perspective. So I just want to make that comment. Nothing to be done right now, but just on our list of things to think about and do. Again, we have always thought it may be moving. It may get some steam, and it looks like it's getting some steam through funding on the North Dakota side. So that will require us to actually make a decision here. I would assume within the next 6 to 12 months, and that could be quite a hefty decision.
David, it looks like you're edging to make a comment.
I am. I've been attending a number of the water-related conversations with the Valley Prosperity Partnership as well, and they have been the energy behind really pushing, not only the water issues around the control of too much water with the flooding, but then now particularly water supply, because as we look to the future, as this metro is growing, our thirst for water is growing, and drought is one of those things out there that could really create some problems. So they're pushing hard. The governor of North Dakota has made a really substantial recommendation for funding toward this project, and Ralph is right. The decision-making time is going to just really jump up on us. And to that, and we're going to talk about a couple of things, but our strategic planning process, I think we're going to need to get very seriously into what that means to us in that particular category for our strategic work, and asking the questions of whether this is really something that is critical to our needs as opposed to more critical to the needs of the folks on the other side of the river that don't have an aquifer and so forth underneath. So they need us to participate, I think, by their financial plan, but I think we really need to work with our friends at the City Council on how it is that this truly affects us, and if it's something that we're going to be able to afford.
If I'm not mistaken, and Bill, you can correct me, we have been studying this issue for many years, number one. Number two, we do have a remarkable resource in terms of the Buffalo Aquifer. We know from previous geological information that the Buffalo Aquifer would do us well for approximately 10 years of a long-term drought, and I think that they identified that as a 1930s type drought. That is a tremendous asset which our neighbors to the west obviously don't have access to. At the same time, there has been a study and discussion at this board, probably predating when the two of you came on board, relative to utilizing the well fields to the south of Moorhead, and I think we've even acquired some easements to that extent. So we're going to, yes, we are coming to a point where the discussion needs to be held, and I guess since Chris is not here tonight, Bill, I think that we should schedule a discussion on that topic early in 2015 so that we can discuss it and grapple with it and understand what it is that we have to deal with, so that we can also inform our colleagues in the City Council about the issues that are in front of us. At the same time, we, as you're probably aware, we did specifically withdraw water from the Red River over the last many years to allow the Buffalo Aquifer to recharge. So it's back up to levels that it hasn't been in a long time. At the same time, we want to save that thing as long as we possibly can. So I think that, and again, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong in those comments, but we are not in the same position. It was interesting when I was reading the article where it indicated in the event that Fargo doesn't have enough sales tax revenues that they will look to other avenues. And I'm assuming that we were one of those avenues. But we obviously have some needs going forward.
The Fargo and Cass County folks, though, are paying sales tax now for many of the diversion and flood control and mitigation projects as it is. So an earlier discussion today, as a matter of fact, was really keying on how it is that they're depending on these various resources and hopefully not going to special assessments and things like that. So I think, to be fair to our friends in Fargo and Cass County as well, we need to engage, and they need to know where we're going to be, as this issue arises, and whether we're going to be be an equal partner, or are they going to be a participant, or you know, what's in between? You know, where are we going to end up?
Well, and even if we went to develop the southern well system, there are going to be huge costs associated with that as well, infrastructure-wise. So yeah, I think, anything you wanted to add to that, Bill?
Well, I think you've encapsulated most of the issues right there, and probably one of the largest ones is just the cost, you know, and that's going to be an impact to our customers. Of course, our large customers are going to be very concerned about any raise, you know, in the costs. But I think you encapsulated it pretty well. I mean, we do have a tremendous resource here that lasts us for 10 years, so we've got not as much of a need. However, there's a big project that may happen in the west of us, and our participation would maybe, number one, help it happen, and number two, we may need it someday as well.
Well, and to go even a bit further than that, if we remember the conversations that we had when Maury Lanning made his presentation before us this past year, just because they want to build it doesn't necessarily mean that that water is going to be available, because there are going to be downstream users on the Missouri that have some real positions relative to what's going to happen with that Missouri River water. And actually what this is a new twist on the old Garrison diversion.
All of the issues.
Yeah, it's huge issues.
Including the Canadian issues.
Right, and quite frankly, we may want to move forward with what we want to do, irrespective of what happens to the west, given the timeframes that they may be looking at. So, yeah, so I think we should get a report ready as early in 2015 so we can grapple with those issues. Because I think you also want to know how much of a participation player you want to be with regard to those committees.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Kind of alongside those lines, I had some questions I'd asked you, I'd posed to you back a couple weeks ago about the tremendous assets that we have here, the aquifers, and what protections we have in place to make sure that those stay safe in terms of corporations and corporate interests looking at, you know, wanting a city to possibly sell their water rights and different things like that. Is it possible to have that kind of review of what our charter says or what MPS documents say in terms of what protections we have in place to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen?
Well, I think not only, I don't think there's a whole lot in the charter that speaks relative to those issues, but I know that, John, you're familiar with the legal issues involved, because we have taken steps, aggressive steps, to protect the aquifer in the past when we thought it was in any way being endangered by private users. And John's very familiar with that, and maybe we should have a comprehensive discussion of all of those issues, because they are very important to us. And as much as we talk about the electricity-related issues that we have at Moorhead Public Service, those water-related issues are just as important, if not more so. John, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, we did bring an action to stop some development on top of the aquifer, and we successfully worked out an arrangement with that landowner. We've also contacted several other landowners to put them on notice. We pushed to get some favorable zoning regulation for aquifer protection, and we did get a positive result in that. We try to be watchful about what's happening over the aquifer now. One of the best things that happened, though, was the zoning regulation that we were proponents of that was passed.
Do you know of any language that talks, though, about the prohibition of the sale of a municipal water system or municipal water rights to a
Yes, there are prohibitions specifically in the charter, and I don't know if I answered those for you earlier or not, Heidi, but any sale of assets under the control of this body must, by their nature, be approved by this body, as well as, I think, a vote of the public.
By the city also.
And the city,
and the
yeah.
public vote.
And a public vote. So there are a number of stumbling blocks before you get to the position where that would ever happen. And
Let alone state law.
let alone state law. And in all honesty, I don't know if anybody would want to come in and take over a municipality's water system if for no other reason, and Rolf can speak to this, of the millions and millions of dollars they'd inherit in terms of infrastructure rebuilding that has to be done. And so there are a lot of issues, but I think a comprehensive discussion is in order, number one. Number two, maybe we should again, invite our friends on the city council to another tour of those water resources so you get a better hands-on picture of what it is that we have for infrastructure and what we don't have in terms of pumps and things like that. So I think we should do that in the spring as well if you're so inclined.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, water scarcity is an issue that it may not be hitting us right now, but you certainly see it out west, and as it becomes more and more of an issue, you're going to have not just corporations, you're going to have a lot of interested parties looking at water-rich areas and where can they get.
Well, and quite frankly, in terms of preservation, you only have to go down to the Twin Cities and look at that whole situation surrounding White Bear Lake and what's happened down there, and we're painfully aware of that as well. And so, yeah, we should be taking a look at all of those issues.
Yep.
But you've got something on your plate in terms of a study and also in terms of our strategic plan. Anything further, Heidi?
No,
Okay.
no, thank you.
Okay, Bill, any other members of the commission? Bill, do you want to go on with your report?
I sure can. Other than what's in the report, the only one I have is that letter that went out, and we did revise that letter, the thank you letter to Senator Klobuchar regarding her signing of a letter that dealt with the new, or the EPA proposed rules from the Clean Air Act on existing plants. We're going to keep watching that issue. It's going to, probably come to a head here in the next few months. So there's negotiating going on between Congress, and the president's pushing it real hard. So it possibly will happen, but it could be very significant to our electric rates. Probably the good news is that it would affect everyone's electric rates across the country. It's going to make us, from an economic standpoint, it's going to be a concern to all utilities and all customers of utilities. But I think it was you, Ken, that asked about what are the potential impacts, and what we put in the letter was, just to the Missouri River Energy Services members, it would, if the rule stayed the way it's proposed, which it very may well happen, it would be about $35 million annually to the Missouri River members, and again, we're about 10% of that, so that'd be $3.5 million, added to our bill, which would be roughly another 20% additional onto our bill. And again, if that happens, nationwide, it's not as big of a deal to us because everyone's rates would go up. But there is going to be winners and losers, just like there always is. And we're, fairly heavily coal, and that would affect us that way. So about a 20% increase. So anyway, it's good that Senator Klobuchar is putting up a bit of resistance to that, and we'll see what happens.
So along those lines, do we have an update on the turbine at the Wheatland power plant? Is that running fine now? Sorry.
Aren't you in charge?
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson would like to go first.
Would you?
Because apparently I just spoke.
You're out of order.
I'm totally out of order. So Mr. Norman, Mr. Norman was sleeping on the job, and Mr. Anderson would like to speak. So would you please have Mr. Anderson speak first?
No, I'd rather not.
No, I don't want to talk anymore.
I'll answer your question
I would like
first.
the record to reflect the fact that Ralph does not want to talk anymore. Okay? And Mr. Anderson?
I have a fair, actually, it's a fairly serious response to that, but that was interesting. To be devil's advocate a little bit, I would like to have in that conversation about the EPA actions and the senator's letter to be somewhat instructive too, because there are people in the country and in our community that feel fairly strongly about the standards as well. Mm-hmm. And so, if we're taking a position and we're encouraging our senator to take a position about these things, I'd like it to be more than just the knee-jerk reaction of a utility interest and so forth to what it is that is trying to be accomplished as well. So, so that it's an informed statement and an informed opinion rather than just a reaction to, oh God, the utility bill's going to go up. There are some things that we have to pay for in the community, and I'm not saying that I'm on one side or the other of this. And as a commissioner for the utility, I guess I have to be careful about how it is that we take positions, but I want to make sure that we understand that we aren't also then just somewhat contributing to what is something detrimental to our environment as well. And maybe there's some middle ground here that we haven't even discussed in the conversation. So, I just want to react to that, because as that letter comes by, and as I put my name to it, I also want to have some understanding that I'm putting my signature to something that I really kind of believe. And I'm not sure that I am as informed on this issue as I probably should be.
Good point.
Were your comments regarding the same issue?
No.
Okay, then I'll, as a public utility, and as this community's public utility, we've done these letters before, and quite frankly, Les has raised some of the same issues that you've raised over the years in terms of making these reactions. I don't think that we're knee-jerk, because we have gone on record for a long, long time indicating our preference for protecting the environment and protecting what it is that we have for resources. At the same time, there's got to be a balancing act done with regard to all of these things, including the use of coal or the use of nuclear fuels or whatever. And a good example of that was the millions and millions and millions of dollars that were spent on the design of Big Stone 2 that never was brought to fruition. And if you stop and think about the impacts environmentally, they would have doubled the capacity of that particular plant and reduced the emissions by more than 50%, which makes a lot of sense, especially in view of the fact, for those of us who live in this part of the world, sometimes referred to as a frozen tundra, that we do have to have some baseline electricity available to us. That cannot be provided by wind power, as we've proven time and time again, nor can it be provided by solar power. Then we're looking at what other means we have to provide that baseline of service. And if anybody thinks that the use of coal has been lessened in southern Minnesota, all they have to do is sit over by the train tracks next to our building and watch those trains going through with load after load after load of lignite going through this community. But yeah, you're right. We do have to take a stand. At the same time, that's why I question the first draft of the letter, because we didn't say what the impacts were. If we're going to talk about impacts, what are they? And these are important considerations, and we've stressed education from this board for years. And so if we're going to go out there as a municipal utility and take a position, I think it's something that we want to be proud of when we're talking to our local students. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. So any more revisions you're going to make to the letter to reflect what it is that Mr. Anderson wants to say or not say?
Well, I think there's going to be more letters on these issues, and it gets real complex real quickly. I think that this senator is already taking that balance into account. And I think what we're raising is just the concern about the cost. And, phasing in of some of those costs is going to be important. And like I said, I think some of these things that are being pushed right now by the president are going to move along. And I think the whole industry is anticipating that. We're saying just make sure we do this in a reasonable way so that rates don't cause an economic impact.
And I have confidence that this senator in particular probably is finding that balance. But I just want to make sure that we're understanding what it is we're saying as well.
And we have talked about this before with this commission, and I know that we review Missouri River Energy Services position papers, and we sometimes review the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association position papers, and we may want to just take a little more time and go through those issues and have and just talk about those a bit, and whether or not you want to vote on them or not. That would be the other thing to do too, is to vote. And we may not have unanimous votes on all these positions that we take, but it is nice to do a thank you to these senators when they,
The thank you is a good idea, but I like what you just said, too. I think it's a good idea for us to have what is a meaningful conversation about these things once in a while, rather than really just putting a signature on something, so.
yep, no, we'll do that.
Good point. Is there anything you'd like to add? Would you like the floor?
No, I do not.
I'd like to give you an update on what's happening at the power plant.
I'd like to resolve this first. You don't want the floor?
No, I don't want to go.
I'm
And
sorry
he's-
that I missed a little bit. Did you guys approve that letter just now?
No, we haven't done anything.
They're just
yet.
gonna sign it.
We're just talking.
Just talking.
Gonna sign it?
Yep.
No approval? Okay.
I see we've had a change of staff over on the administrative position. So is there any, do you want to approve this letter?
I haven't read it yet. I haven't seen it.
Okay, I think you have it here. Well,
Do we need to
Les-
approve it?
Which does bring up the thing that I bring up every time.
Yes,
that
you do.
There's a piece of paper on our dais up here that we've never seen before.
if you're going to get Les Baki's signature, you better have a position that he can live with.
So, and you and I, Dave, I think agree probably as much as we disagree on these issues. I brought it up before. And I'm glad you're bringing it up as well, because there is a balance that we must have in nearly every issue we decide up here, whether it's a budgetary issue, whether it's an environmental issue or a water issue.
If someone moves approval, I'll vote.
Okay, would somebody like to move approval?
I will.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Casey, we've approved that letter. I'm glad you're here. I'd like to move down, you're finished, Bill, or was there something else?
Well, I
you
was
were
going
gonna
to update you. Ralph had a question about the status of the turbines that had a longer than expected outage. And
Which
just to give
turbines
you-
were those?
These are the turbines at the Laramie River Station in Wheatland, Wyoming, and where we get, a majority of our power that comes from Missouri River Energy Services. So probably about 35% of your power comes from this coal plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. And there's 3 units, and and they take the units off for scheduled maintenance, every few years, if not every year. And what they found this year was some turbine blades that had some fairly significant cracks in them. And so they're repairing those, and I don't believe they're done yet, but I'm at a meeting this week where I'll ask about that. But it's a longer than expected outage, and of course, then we end up having to buy replacement power during that time, so it does affect us that way. But I don't quite know if they're done with that yet, because I know they were still working on it. But they're doing 1 unit this year, they're doing the next unit next year, and then the following unit, or the last unit the following year. And what we're really hoping for is not that there isn't a major failure, like i.e. one of the blades coming off while it's running, which would cause major damage to the unit, probably take the unit out. So it's something that we're going to be watching real closely here over the next 3 years.
Are there any other turbines in the system that haven't been working properly?
That haven't been
Yes.
of ours?
Any on the north side of Moorhead?
Turbines?
Yeah,
Or
those.
systems?
Turbines,
Turbines
turbines,
on the north side of Moorhead?
like a wind turbine?
Oh, wind turbines. Oh, okay. We're still having trouble with the west one. I talked to Travis today about that.
That'd be
and
Travis Schmidt?
Travis Schmidt, yes. And he gave me a little bit of an update today, and they're still intermittently going, that unit is going out, replacing parts. Basically, it's about a 15-year-old unit, and we're having intermittent problems with it. It'll run for a while, and then it'll stop. Right now, he's looking at a control cable that may need to be replaced, so,
Well, I hope at the 15-year mark that you at least operated better than that turbine is.
yeah, I will.
Okay.
May I ask a question, please?
Would you like the floor?
Yes, please.
I yield the floor.
Thank you.
Well, they can turn your mic off.
At what time do we
Turn
need to
your
look
mic
at? The mic is on.
He didn't hear you. We want to make sure that everybody hears us.
Good thing this last
Yes.
meeting of the year.
At what point do we have to look at replacing or taking it down? I mean, we've been looking at this for, what, a year now? Intermittent, right? And we're putting a lot of money into it. We have to put a new, I mean, at what point do we need to look at a replacement or like I said, taking it down?
They are, when we put it in back in 1999, it had a 20-year life, so that would be 2019. And since we're in a lower wind regime, we always expected it to operate a bit longer than that, 20 years. But as of right now, it's very possible that at 20-year mark, we would be looking at taking it down. So I think, I mean, it's something to consider. They don't make them that small anymore, and you can't put a larger one there because of FAA rules. So, I mean, it's very possible that you may be taking it down. The unit has basically a brand-new transmission in it, so we sure hope we can get the intermittent, instrumentation issues figured out so that it can run. Because I think from a transmission standpoint, it's in fine shape.
Yep, thanks. I'm done now.
Okay? Thank you. Could we move on to item 12, please?
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Could I get a clarification on Bill's report,
Which report?
on his general manager's report?
Okay, certainly.
Last meeting, we discussed the sprinkler systems as a need for 2 lines going to a house. But in your report, it appears that we maybe only need 1 line. Is that, am I interpreting that correct?
Yes, that's my, Chris put together that paragraph, and I believe that's, and Chris isn't here right now. Kevin, do you know about the regulation that only needs 1?
Can I ask you to come forward and
come up here.
identify yourself for somebody at home who might want to listen to this?
Okay, Kevin Young, Water Plant Supervisor. I talked with Chris a little bit last week about this, and he thinks we're covered with our rules and regulations because we are requiring a 1-inch meter. And then he doesn't think we'll have to add to it, and
Okay.
we should be good.
For now, that looks like the case, so.
Does that answer your question, John? Okay.
Well, just with the understanding that the final rules are coming out on January 24th. So we'll need to revisit that to ensure that nothing has changed.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll keep a close eye on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12 is to approve the reclassification of the 2014 electric transfer payments to the city of Moorhead. William, are you going to address this?
Absolutely not. Nancy Lund.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Nancy Lund is going to try and explain the reclassification that we're talking about here.
When did we lose control of this meeting?
You never had.
Okay.
You lost in about 2006, I think.
Nancy Lund, Administration and Finance Manager. In the City of Moorhead's 2014 budget, they made some one-time adjustments to the transfer from the electric division to the general fund that at the time of their budgeting process last year and the time of our budgeting process last year, there was not clarity in their request to us and how we accounted for that on our books. So a couple meetings ago, city staff asked if we could clarify our end of our budget to reconcile with theirs. Our counter was for them to clarify their original budget resolutions and really detail out the transfer dollars that were one-time increases, such as the $500,000 that was going to increase in the general fund budget in return for a contribution to our power plant project. The other item, and that was clear, I think, to both parties, the other item that really needs the reclassification is that in the city's 2014 capital improvement fund, they actually were asking for less than the 5% maximum transfer in capital improvement, but they needed $41,000 extra in the general fund, so they passed, or meant to pass a $41,000 one-time increase in the general fund. We did not record that transaction in our budget process at all. It was very unclear at the time what needed to be done. City staff now needs us to reclassify our budget so that the money comes from the electric division and goes to the appropriate fund within the city budget. And so we had, I think the commission had asked council to clarify their budget dollars. They've done that. In addition to what was on the table at that time, they also clarified the remaining $70,000 difference between MPS's budget and the city's budget. At the same time, they were looking at the transfer issue and the transfer agreement. So they've got actually 3 items that they've clarified, and we just now need to basically move dollars from one line item in our budget to another line item, and then we will match with the city's budget
So
requests.
effectively, this is a reconciliation of both budgets.
Yes, for 2014, yes.
And on December 31st of 2014, both of us will have budgets that match.
Yes, yes, they will.
It's a miracle.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Tiny Tim would be so happy. Are there any further questions for Nancy? Any clarifications? Ralph, would you like to?
I have a question. You're fine with the way it's presented?
Yes, yes, all the numbers make sense. Yeah, no dollar impact to MPS for this reclassification at all.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I move approval of item number 12.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Then we'll move on to item 13, which is to approve the streetlight utility service agreement with the city of Moorhead. We are not operating a utility. We are providing services to the city who will own that utility. Okay?
Exactly.
Mr. Schwant, are you addressing this subject?
Well, I can go into a little more detail than that, but that was a good representation of what we're talking about here. The city of Moorhead did begin a streetlight utility. It will operate starting January 1st, 2015, I suppose, or maybe when they approved it here this last meeting. Moorhead Public Service will continue to do what we've been doing for a long, long time, and that is to, install and maintain streetlights in the city of Moorhead. We essentially are the contractor to the city. The city is the owner of the streetlights, owner of the utility, I should say, and they will still tell us where to put the streetlights. They will. Something that's a little different is that we've been going back and forth on standards, the specifications and standards for street lighting. We, as part of this agreement, have asked them to define the standards that they would like. So where would you like, or what types of light standards do you want out there? And then once we know that, then we will design the system and install the system. The agreement, I think, is in pretty good order. It's a one-year agreement, and in addition to that, there is going to be a study that the city council is going to implement by July 1st. I think they're getting a report back from staff. Basically, that will look into a lot of the details of the specifications, the cost, the placement, all those things, and we'll work with them in order to make it as efficient and effective as we can. So,
Okay.
all in all, I think it's a pretty good agreement, good start to their streetlight utility and our operating under that.
Any questions, any discussion?
The other thing I should mention is that this is the second agreement that we have with the city of Moorhead. First one is our fiber optic system agreement that happened about this time last year. So this is, again, another one of those agreements that just kind of define things between us and the council. So.
If I might, there's only one comment that I'd like to make regarding this form, and that's just me, but at section 11, it indicates that this is the entire agreement, the entire and only agreement between the parties. And that was language that I had complained about previously because, quite frankly, no, it's not. We have other agreements with the city, but it is the only agreement we have relative to this subject matter. And I think that should be clarified. And you'll hear me say the same thing with regard to any future agreements that we're going to be talking about as well. But I think that's a minor clarification that I'd ask you to make. Rolf?
I have yet another question. Do we need a similar agreement, not today, for the the billing we do for the fire protection? Because we had talked about that as well, right?
Yeah, we should look into that.
At some point, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, that could be another issue, because we are billing for that. It's just whether or not we're doing it the right way. And we've got some concerns about that.
So just for 15, I think it's another issue we should clarify in 15. probably.
Might I ask what you mean by, we don't know if we're doing it the right way? Could I have a clarification of that?
I'll look at Nancy. Do you have a good easy clarification on that? I mean, it might be too complex to actually bring up at this point.
Okay, if that's the case, Nancy, if you could clarify that, then we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we're supposed to be doing in the right way, obviously.
Yeah, it just has to do with what the charter says about, the $40 fee and,
Oh, okay.
and then the fact that we're phasing some things in, and it gets a little more complex, but we can bring that up
Okay,
in a report.
David?
I'd just like to make sure, too, that as we get into establishing the rates and fees for the service, that we're really very clear on what that is. In observing some of the conversations and discussions leading up to this, there has not been that clarity of understanding. I think in particular on the part of some of our members of the council who have brought up, I think, understandable questions about what it is that the city is being charged for. And so, as we get to that point, I'd really like to eliminate that kind of conversation so that when we do establish the rate, there is clarity, there is real understanding of what it is that they're paying for, what they're getting for the fee, and that we don't have to come back and say, well, golly, we don't know what MPS is charging us for.
I heard those same comments, and I agree with you 100% that we want to have no misunderstandings with regard to what it is we do and why we do it. And you'd indicated something about light standards and so forth. Now, I'm going to assume that the decorative standards, like the ones we see on First Avenue North or in some subdivisions of the city, are more expensive than the one I have in front of my home, which is a large gray fiberglass pole Joe happened to place there. And so I'm just wondering, what do we do? It works intermittently, of course, sort of like Joe now that I think about it. But do we have a certain inventory that we keep of those kind of things? Or what are we going to be doing, and how many different types of poles are we going to have?
Well, that's our concern, because we're concerned with the cost. And the city's also concerned about the cost. In fact, in their ordinance or their resolutions to create the streetlight utility, one of the first things they say is that the cost of street lighting has doubled over the last 10 years. And it has doubled, but our purchase power costs are in there. And then also these more expensive standards are in there. And you can see the decorative standards are occurring all over the country. People are getting more aesthetic about their street lighting, but that does come at a cost. So we want to make sure that it's a collaborative thing that we do when we look at how much inventory we're going to have, how many different standards we're going to have, and those types of things. And I think the city shares our concern.
Well, and to that same extent, I'm going to assume that we're now switching over to LEDs. Those are far more expensive than what we've had before, but they also last about 3 times as long, if not longer, in theory, if somebody doesn't shoot them out. So that also goes into that whole discussion.
And they've come down in cost quite a bit. In fact, we started installing those in all of our replacements for residential streetlights, just because you're not going to have to touch it again for another 10 years, where typically it would be 2 years you'd be touching it. So that should help with the cost, but with the long-term maintenance costs, the upfront cost is a little bit more, but it's come down quite a bit. So you're going to see LED lights everywhere in the city. As to the rates that we charge the city, we basically do charge a per kilowatt hour charge to the city based on our cost of service study. We just completed our cost of service study, and I think once we just kind of go through that with the city, they'll understand where all those costs are coming from, because we're basically just passing on our costs to the city, so there's no markup there. So
Any further discussion on the streetlight service agreement? If not, I would entertain a motion. David?
I'd move to approve the streetlight service agreement with the city of Moorhead.
I'll second that.
With that one change to item 11.
Please.
With that change.
Is that your second as well?
I did.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That brings us down to item 14, which I'm very happy to see. That is to approve the electric fund transfer agreement with the city of Moorhead. And again, I cannot tell the members of the Gang of Four, Gang of Five, depending upon which they want to call themselves, for the hard work that they put into that particular subject, many, many hours. And hopefully the citizens of Moorhead will recognize the complexity of what it is we've come up with and its benefits to everybody in this community. It's just one of the right things to do. There is my political comment, and I want to thank everybody, including the mayor, for having taken the time to work with us on that subject. Bill?
Budget Committee, Task Force?
Excuse me. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Nope.
Other member of the Budget Committee?
Thank you. You know, and I think you said it really well, Ken, but I really appreciate the efforts of everybody as well. I mean, it was quite a year. We've had a lot of good conversations, and not all of them very easy. And in fact, there's been some contention, and I think, you know, we've gotten past that now. And you know, the city took their action last week. I'm anxious for us to take our action this week. But I guess I just wanted to say thank you, because it was quite an effort, and some people really came together and did some tough stuff here to make this happen. So it seems complex at first, but once the numbers are in place and we just provide the formula, it's going to give us the standard for us to work for several years. And that takes the complexity out of it. And in particular, it takes kind of the wrangling and the politics out of it. So I think that's probably one of the most important contributions we've made, is we've made it businesslike, we've made it you know, meaningful, and we've really made it make sense. So with that, I would like to move approval of the electric fund transfer agreement with the city of Moorhead.
Okay. Is there a second first?
I would like to second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, John?
Just a clarification, and maybe Heidi, you can address this, is that with listening to some of the telecasts of some of the different meetings,
John, could I ask you to speak up just a little bit? There you go.
with listening to some of the telecasts, I'm still hearing a bit of, I don't know if it's confusion, or just wanted to make sure that all staff and council members are aware and understand how we're going to go in the future.
Thanks for the question, John. You know, it's my understanding that through our conversations that we had at several council meetings, that everyone is very well aware of the agreement, what it contains, what it pertains to, what to expect for the next few years. Some council members asked some tough questions and got some answers, and in the end, it was voted on and approved, and I'm very confident that everyone is well aware of all the information in that agreement. And yeah, I'm excited to tag along with what Commissioner Anderson was saying. I also wanted to add that it takes the politics out of it, as well as gives us some predictability. And that was something that was missing for many, many years, I think. You know, that fear of not knowing what the city was going to ask for, not knowing if the city was going to change and ask for more from the transfer. That's now gone for the next few years, and so I'm very, very, very excited about that. And want to thank you two fellas for your time and patience and commitment. So thank you guys.
I just want to know what the Gang of 4/5 is going to do next year.
I don't know. We need to come up with a new topic.
You guys are going to be lonely.
Let's not.
We'll come up.
Well, and you know, and you look at item 16, which is before us in a few moments, the imposition of our rates. It's nice that we do have the ability to now base our rates with something in front of us and that predictability. And I hope that in time, everybody on the council will embrace this approach as being the right thing to do for this community. And with that said, we have a motion and a second concerning this particular matter. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's wonderful. Going on to item 15, and that is to accept a report on the proposed budget for 2015.
Point of clarification on that last agreement, item number 17.
You're not going to mess with that agreement at this point, son.
Item number 17 is that same issue about this being the only agreement between the parties?
Exactly, and that's why in any of these agreements where it says this is the only agreement, no, it's not. That's lawyers' boilerplate, as John would agree with me, but we have to indicate that it's for the subject matter contained in that agreement.
Okay, and that's part of the motion.
So
Please.
did we make, yeah, okay.
I believe that was part of the motion.
Is everybody okay with that?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Now can we go on to item 15?
Yes.
Okay. Item 15, Bill. Who's reporting on this?
I think Nancy generally reports on this, so we'll have Nancy kind of give a quick overview. A lot of it is similar to what you've seen before, and we've talked about the agreements.
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. At this point in the budget process, we're not changing too many numbers, and normally this report is everything you've seen before. We've updated numbers with the transfer agreement, obviously, and I would like to express my thanks to that working group, too. So a tremendous step forward in budgeting and predictability as far as budgeting goes for our rates to us. I appreciate all that work also. Here we would accept any more customer comments. You know, we went from a early projection of a 5% rate increase on the electric side down to a 1%. I think that has led to very few customer comments coming in about our proposed rates. So at this point, it's just basic information, a 1% rate increase projected or proposed for 2015, a couple 2% after the 2 years after that. On the electric side, on the water side, a 6.5% rate increase, which has been the number since we started the budget process. So a lot of solidity on that number. And so mostly this meeting is just, or this report is just to accept additional comments. And I do think one was distributed earlier this evening.
Rolf? Just a quick comment too on the 1%. I mean, so we are clear, we have been pretty clear over the last couple of weeks. What we have done is we have spread the 5% out basically over 3 years.
Yes.
So that's so everybody understands that. Number one. Number two, I always like percentages, but I also like actual numbers. So for an average residential customer, the electric increase will be 85 cents and the water increase will be $1.86, correct?
Correct, yes.
I mean, it's still $2.70 more each month, but it's hopefully palatable to everybody. And on the water side, I mean, 6.5% is a big number, obviously, but we know what we're using it for. We need to replace the water mains, so.
If I might, in the same regard, we received a letter that was handed out this evening, a letter that was addressed to us by Anheuser-Busch, one of our large customers, one of our very important customers, and truly a good corporate neighbor in this community, thanking all of us for the work that's been done on coming up with a plan to minimize the impacts of rate increases going off into the future, and hopefully they'll have some good news for us in the near future as well. Is there any further discussion on this matter?
Just a thank you to Nancy, too, for all the work that her staff did on that.
I was going to say, we
budget.
can sit here and thank all of the policymakers, but whether it's the city staff or our staff, there is just a huge volume of materials that they have to go through every year in order to put together not only our budgets, but also everything that's going to be necessary when our auditors come in here and check things. And Nancy, Bill, everybody involved in this, Mike, Wanda, yeah, everybody did a good job, and everybody worked very, very hard. And as you said, sometimes things got contentious, but you know what? If you're going to have an in-depth discussion, sometimes the negatives have to be brought up and dealt with and handled, and I think we did that. And I agree. Thank you, Nancy, for all that you did and for all that you continue to do for this department. Oftentimes we forget about that, so thank you. Well put, Bill. Did we accept the report on 15?
Not yet.
Thank you.
I move approval
Thank you,
of
Casey.
item number 15.
I second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. It brings us down to item 16, which is to approve the final 2015 strategic plan, budgets, and rates. Bill?
Well, Nancy and I are waiting for your questions. If you have any further questions on these items, we've talked about them plenty, but if you have questions, we're ready to answer them.
David?
I'm not sure I want to approve the strategic plan because we have not had our meeting yet to discuss the strategic plan. I mean, we have a great draft in front of us.
Yep.
But, you know, for several months now, we've been talking about getting together around this table to get into some of the meat of these things. And we did get into the water piece for a little bit this evening, and there's a lot more to discuss. I don't know what the appropriate, step is going to be, but I resist approving the strategic plan tonight.
Let me ask you this, David, as we move forward. I mean, the strategic plan for 2015 is the steps we anticipate taking during 2015 to make this a more efficient and better operating utility. And I'm assuming, based on our earlier discussions tonight, that there will be more in-depth discussion early on, very early on the subject of our water resources and where we're going to go with that from both the protection issue and for future use. Are you anticipating that you want that included in that plan?
Well, I guess maybe I'm holding it back so that we have that discussion.
Okay.
And if I need to hold it back to have that discussion, I'm going to propose holding it back. If we can move into 2015 with a plan to meet and to have a meaningful strategic discussion, then I guess we could approve this one as what we're carrying into the next year, but we've got to have that conversation.
Well, I don't know if it's necessary that we approve the strategic plan, but it is necessary that we approve the budget and the rates.
Yeah.
Right.
And so to that extent, if whomever will be making the motion to approve wants to delete reference to the strategic plan, I'm assuming we can, and then move on with the approval of the budget and rates. And yeah.
And that'd be fine.
And our strategic plan, is, if people don't know about it, we've been doing this for many years, and it's a very comprehensive plan. Surprisingly, not everything that we do up here just sort of happens. And so, yeah, I also want that I want a report from Chris on the water-related issues.
Yep.
So is there a motion concerning item 16?
I'll move approval of the final 2015 budget and rates.
Okay.
I'll second that.
I've got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
Would you like to include in that the commission and staff convene early in 2015 to work on strategic plan?
Yeah, we could do that, or, the plan was tabled a couple of meetings
Yes,
back.
it was.
It's still on the table. It's still there.
That's fine with me.
So, my thought as I was making the motion was, that's just still there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you bet.
Okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. And of course, our budget committee and negotiating committees were rather busy toward the end of the year. So that explains why some strategic documents weren't done. I'm assuming, Casey, that you will look for the appropriate date that we can do what it is
Do
there.
our best again.
I know, and you always do, Casey.
Who seconded that just now?
Mr. Bakke. Item 17 is to approve a task order with AE2S for the North Buffalo Wellfield generator connection. who's speaking to this?
Well, I'll invite Kevin Young up to the podium again. And this is in regards to the Buffalo Aquifer and our backup water supply, or our secondary water supply, primary during a drought.
And here again, this is something that goes to what I mentioned to Heidi at the beginning of the meeting, that we may want to really ask the council to go with us on a tour this year to see those facilities, because I don't think many people have, and they weren't there at the last one, and there's work to be done. Kevin?
Kevin Young, Water Plant Supervisor. This task order is part of a grant we just got confirmation that we received from the Department of Health. That grant is like a 50-50 cost share, so we up to $10,000 the Department of Health will pay. The generator design fees is what A2S will be completing. That's not included in the Department of Health's cost share. So we got permission to move ahead with the design of the generator docking station, just so that we can keep the project moving. And we should be able to go ahead with the rest of the grant probably in April, I would imagine.
Okay. Any questions? Do you have a motion concerning this matter?
I move approval of item 17.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Did you get that? I think that,
John did.
John?
John did.
John was faster but quieter.
John was.
It kind of made it sound like it was between you from
It was an echo. It was an echo.
You got me on that one.
Give him the check, neither of them would move that fast. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, we already, okay. Brings us down to item 18, which is to approve a lease with 702 Communications for the I-94 water tower.
Will you entertain a motion?
Yes?
I move to approval of item 18.
Second. Oh, John seconded it.
Mr. Regalo seconded that one. Oh,
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any
This
further
appears to be
discussion?
a very, very standard agreement.
It
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. We're not going into executive session before closing. Again, I want to thank everybody for,
You're not, we are.
we're not going into closed session. John?
I would just like clarification on a couple items here.
Okay?
I had received some information regarding a awards night. Has that issue's been resolved at this point
That issue was resolved.
satisfactorily?
Well, it wasn't really our issue. It
It was canceled, if I remember.
It was canceled. The banquet was canceled, and I think we're actually going to be reviewing our recognition luncheon that we do in the fall based on information that the city received about recognition-type dinners. So, I mean, I think there was a ruling by the state auditor in 2014 that came out with some different guidelines that we were unaware of, and I think the city was unaware of, and we'll take a look at that for our next award banquet as well. But they canceled it last Thursday, so.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay?
And then, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I would like to put on an agenda item for next meeting.
Okay?
We had talked a little bit about the counts or the charge-off counts.
Like write-offs and.
So we can do just a review of the process and what happens to those and
Yeah,
that
that's a
sort
good
of thing.
idea.
Okay? Anything further, John?
Well, thank you.
Okay. Again, my gratitude to everybody who worked on all of the agreements that we have in front of us. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and let's look forward to 2015 as being even better than it was in 2014. With that, our meeting is adjourned.